one thing which, you and I have in common is when we were students at Bonaventure, I think neither of us thought we'd end up having the career paths that we did. But it's been fun, it's been enjoyable, it's been rewarding. But if you can just briefly, fill the students in on what you've done professionally. Like I said, they read a couple of bullet points about you.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I am a 1976 graduate of St. Bonaventure. I worked on the BV while I was there. I worked in a radio station, but mostly in a BV, and I was news editor. And my crowning achievement, I guess, was sports editor. When we used to write the sports editor always had a column called Tomahawk, and it was just a real great way for me to get going in the business. And I have a column now for the news, and I think about writing Tomahawk back in my BV days. And I'll also say something else to you guys, that there's not one day that I don't sit down to my laptop here in the basement of my home now, or usually at the newsroom of the news, when I don't use something that I learned at St. Bonaventure about how to write a story, about how to conduct myself, and just I think that there's not a day goes by that I don't think of something that Dr. Giandoli or Dr. Evans or one of the other profs beat into my head about how to write and write clearly and distinctly. So there's my little Bonaventure commercial right there. But so once I got out of Bonas in '76, I worked for almost 6 years at the Olean Times-Herald, first in the Pennsylvania Bureau and then in the Kent County Bureau. Covered some really cool stuff. People say, well, what'd you cover in Olean? What goes on in Olean? Well, lots of stuff goes on in Olean, and lots of important stuff that's important to the people of Olean. I covered the stories about building the Southern Tier Expressway. You guys take for granted that you can ride to Salamanca along the river now, but it was a huge environmental battle to get that built. And I also covered important stories about the future of railroads in Cattaraugus County. I ended up in the chairman's office of Conrail one day in Philadelphia, addressing those things. So they were important things. And but then I went on in 1982 to what was then the Buffalo Evening News, and I worked for 10 years, kind of as a general assignment guy, a lot of transportation stuff still. A lot of cops and robbers. I could tell you all kinds of stories about Saturday night homicides that I was at for the 11 years that I worked in police headquarters press room on Saturday nights, 5 p.m. to 1 a.m. No, I'm still not bitter about that, as you can tell. But for the last 28 years, I've been the political reporter for the news. So I've been at the news 38 years, and I've been a reporter for 44 years. That's a long time. But it's something that I've enjoyed. I've had terrific experiences in the political world in the 28 years since I took over for George Borelli, who had that job for 30 years before me. And that's basically what I do. And every day is different. I'm finding that more and more. And the business has changed tremendously. We're teetering on the edge a little bit. As you all know, the newspaper business is not a strong business right now, but we are aiming towards the future. And we are continuing to delve into the digital world as much as we possibly can. And we're being very successful, especially during this time of pandemic, when I think the news has done some of its best journalism ever. And that's reflected in the number of digital subscriptions that are continuing to build up the news's digital subscriber base. So, it's not the days when we were selling 325,000 daily papers and 400,000 Sunday papers, but we are still the paper that sets the agenda in Western New York and much of New York State. And don't let anybody tell you that any other website or TV station or some other outfit is better than us at setting the news agenda every day. So that's kind of what I do. And Another campaign is upon us, and we're going to be covering that one. So go ahead.
Okay.
See what kind of reporters you guys are.
Okay. Thanks, Bob. Well, I'm going to take the professor's privilege and ask you the first question.
Yeah.
But I wanted to make a couple observations or things that you said, which I made a couple of notes. One, the pandemic, I think, has shown how important journalism is. Like you said, and the paper, the online paper that you're familiar with, that Ann and I run with the students, Tap into Greater Olean. We just saw our web traffic skyrocket, and people are looking, for that. Which also reminded me when you talked about cops and robbers. Since we have Google Analytics now, you can see who reads what, and like a 2 or 3 paragraph story about someone being arrested gets a lot more hits than some of the stories we should spend a lot of time on, which is a little frustrating, but it tells you where people's interests are. So, and last thing is we still have a sports column in the BV, but we're now more politically correct. It's no longer tomahawk.
Right, I know that.
Yeah, I think it's extra point or something like that. Ann will correct me if I'm wrong.
We don't have a brown Indian running around either.
No, not anyway. It's the bottle wolf. So.
Right.
Okay, well, let me ask you, since you're in your basement in the satellite office of the Buffalo News in the McCarthy house, and most political reporters are doing what you're doing. We took part in there was a Pointer workshop a week or 2 ago about covering the election, and we also had earlier this week. I don't know if you know John Tamari from the Philadelphia Inquirer. He spoke with the class, and he made the point. He's more or less doing the same thing you are. So from your standpoint, the fact that reporters can't get out there the way that you used to, what's law like? What is the public? What are voters missing out on because you're all stuck in basements? Or I mean, some people are getting out, but it's very limited.
Rich, it's a story that your question centers around a Zoom discussion I had yesterday with Denise G., who is the assistant managing editor of the news, and Jerry Zaremski, our Washington bureau chief, and we were planning our campaign coverage for the next 6 weeks. And it is the most frustrating factor right now that I'm sitting here in my basement instead of being out in the world. I've been down here since March, and as I tell everybody, it's the first time in my life I've had my own private office, because I'm usually just sitting in a big newsroom. But as we were talking, it's a difficult thing. How do you go out and talk to people, man in the street kind of thing, when people don't want to be bothered? They don't want to talk to you. And by the same token, do we go out and risk our health by being out there? I haven't been out of here really since, I think, one time in April when the governor came to Roswell Park one day. And that is just not the way we conduct our business. It just isn't. And I'm frustrated by it, and I don't think it's right. But we're doing the best we can. So yesterday, when we made some decisions, we were thinking about how we were going to cover things. And one of the stories we're going to do is go down to Erie, PA, because Pennsylvania is a swing state. New York is not. New York hasn't voted Republican since 1984. And it's the last time that I remember a presidential candidate even coming to Buffalo, when I covered Walter Mondale, believe it or not. And but we decided that Erie would be a great place to just talk about how a neighboring state is going to be a swing state, because Erie is a Democratic city, a Democratic county, which voted for Trump in 2016. And so we decided, yeah, we'll go down there. We might do an awful lot by phone, but we'll go down there because we need to have the Erie dateline to give some credence to this story. Another thing that we're going to do is concentrate on the Buffalo suburbs. The places like Cheektowaga, Hamburg, West Seneca, that are Democratic towns. And you take a place like Cheektowaga, which is a large town of almost 100,000 people. It's blue collar, working class, Democrat, ethnic, Catholic. And it's the kind of ethnic enclave that remains solidly Democrat, except when Donald Trump ran in 2016, and they voted narrowly for Donald Trump. What are they going to do this year? And that is, I think, going to be a key, because if those places decide they're going to go with a regular Democratic stalwart like Joe Biden, then I think Trump loses the election. Not so much because Buffalo, Erie County, and New York State aren't certainly going to be with Biden, but it will tell you what will happen among those kinds of Reagan Democrat voters that have empowered the president in 2016. So to answer your question, I hate being cooped up here. I really do, and I'm actually looking forward to getting out and going down to Erie. And my father used to say, "Get out of the house and get the stink blown off you." So that's what I need to do.
Yeah, I had an editor who said, like, if you looked out in the newsroom and all the reporters were there, you're not doing your job.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Every day I try to get out. I have a couple of lunch groups that I go to, maybe 3 lunch groups where I just go and, it's this guy sitting around a table, and I come back, I pick up stuff. That's how you do it. Sometimes if I'm stuck and I'm bored and I got nothing to do, I'll just get up and walk down Main Street just to see if I bump into somebody, and I usually do. Sometimes I've gotten some good stories like that. My friend Tom Precious, who runs our Albany bureau, we were talking about this the other day. He's very frustrated because the Legislative Correspondents Association, which is an old-time press room that looks like something out of the front page. I love working there when I'm there. But Tom will just get up and say, "Come on," and we'll walk around the inner circle of the 3rd floor of the Capitol just to see who we bump into. And sometimes you'll bump into the Speaker of the Assembly, and you come back with a story. And he's got that method down perfected, and he's not able to do it either.
Yeah, exactly. When I get to the students, I just, I covered the New Jersey State House, and it was much the same. I mean, you go down to the cafeteria for a cup of coffee, you don't know who you'd run into. Everybody's in the same building, and either, even if you didn't get a story, you were building relationships with people, so that when you did need a story, it wasn't the first time they were interacting with you.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay, I think Bob and I, well, not Bob, but I've talked long enough. So, Anshu, I'm going to let you kick it off with a question, and I'll just kind of alternate between you and Wesley, and I might chime in between. But
terrific.
Yeah.
So changing the topic a little bit, Dr. Lee told us that you served as a panelist for a couple of debates. So I was wondering, what the differences between statewide debates and national debates are, and how you feel about both.
Yeah. I don't think there's too much difference, really. I mean, these candidates are subjected to tough questioning, and they're on TV, and it's a real test for them. I think as far as the presidential process goes, there's 3 important things in the presidential contest besides all of the ancillary things that take place on a daily basis. First, you got your convention, where under normal circumstances the party would promote its platform, so to speak, and publicize its message. That's what conventions these days do. The second is the vice presidential pick, and there's a lot of significance in what Joe Biden has done with Kamala Harris this time. And the third is the debates. And I think especially this time around, Joe Biden will be the subject of much scrutiny if he's able to handle this and be able to withstand the pressure of a debate. A lot of questions about that. And it's no different, I don't think, from the debates that I take part in. I've been on, I bet you maybe 4 or 5 statewide gubernatorial debates, several others for the Senate and Attorney General. Most of the time, they've been out of Buffalo TV stations, Channel 17, because they have a large studio there, and sometimes down in New York City. And I've also been on so many that I can't even count for mayor, for members of Congress, for district attorney, for county executive. And I like doing them. I think it's part of the process. I think people learn something from them, and it's a important part of the process. And so I don't think, to answer your question, Andrew, I don't think there's that much difference. Everybody's on trial here, everybody's on camera, everybody's on the spot, and a lot of undecided voters will make up their minds based on TV televised debates. Yeah.
Well, Andrew probably picked the topic because we're, obviously with the presidential debates coming up, we've been reading about them. And one of the questions I had, which you kind of answered, is, are they valuable? And I think you pointed out in your mind a couple ways. Sometimes I guess the other side of that is you're not going to learn a lot. You're not really going to answer the questions, but you definitely see a lot of value in the candidates answering questions on the spot like that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Yeah. Wesley, your turn.
Yeah. So just to continue on the debate track, so for you, not necessarily as a reporter, but as a voter, like what are you looking to get out of the debates?
That's a good question, Wesley. Well, first of all, I'm going to go back to see how Joe Biden performs. We've got the president calling him, feeble Joe and all this stuff. And hey, the guy is the oldest presidential candidate we've ever had. And so I'm anxious to see how he does. Really, is he going to be able to withstand what is going to be a withering attack by the president? The president's going to do everything he can to expose what he perceives to be a weakness on his part. So that's the first thing I'm going to watch for. And so I think that's the kind of thing that will be most important. I don't think there's going to be too much difference I don't know how much new things we're going to learn about their positions. I think we know what their positions are on most things. But I think the president is going to be forced to defend a lot of his past positions. And the same thing when you've got a guy like Joe Biden, who's been in office since 1972. He's got a big, long record that they're going to pick apart. And so I think you're going to see a lot of that. And that's why I think they'll prove key. Did I answer your question? I'm not sure. What was it? Did you ask me then?
Yeah. So like as a voter, what are you looking to get out of the debate?
Yeah. I guess it's the same thing. Yeah. And another thing I think as a voter is, what kind of person are we interviewing, so to speak, here? And I think the debates are kind of an interview for the job. And I think their personality and their demeanor and their ability to be president and to be presidential is something that voters will be watching, and that will be part of the process that leads to their decision.
Yeah. Let me flip Wesley's question a bit. He asked what you look for as a voter. As a journalist, and I don't know if you're covering the presidential debates, but in covering any debate, people can watch the debate on TV or whatever. What do you try to do when you do a debate story afterwards? What are you trying to provide the reader with?
Yeah, debate stories are very hard for me. First of all, sometimes they start at 9 p.m. or something, and we're looking at a deadline of maybe 11:30 p.m. or maybe a little bit later. So they're hard to do. But one of the things that I think has been a real good development in debate coverage in recent years has been fact checking. So I will tell you that we usually have 2 or 3 of our people in the Channel 17 studios for either gubernatorial or county executive or mayoral debates. And as these folks makes their claims, we have fact checkers who will tweet out their findings on the claims of each of the candidates, which goes onto our website. And we will have a story immediately on our website and in the paper the next day about what their claims are and whether they were true or not. I think that will be particularly important in these upcoming presidential debates because, as we know, the president makes claims that are not always true. And so he knows that he will be under scrutiny during this time and that people will immediately determine whether or not he's telling the truth. And the same thing for Joe Biden. So I think that's an important function that we offer.
What do you see as the role of the moderator in terms of fact checking? And when I found the clip, which you probably remember, of Candy Crowley fact checking Mitt Romney in I guess 2016 debate. And it's going to be one moderator. I think it's Chris Wallace for the first one. Should the moderator get involved in fact checking if there's a statement that's obviously false?
Really good question. I don't know what I think about that. I think that as long as there are fact checkers who are there performing that function, those things are eventually going to be determined. But by the same token, Chris Wallace is not going to let a blatant lie go by. You know, he's going to point out, and I think there is a certain responsibility to a certain extent on that. But, you know, I think that on some things, so he doesn't get too bogged down, the moderator might also say, there's one for our fact checkers, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of those things, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
These people, I give them a lot of credit because they're going to get creamed by some members of the viewing audience and lionized by others. It's a tough job.
Yeah.
It's a tough job.
Okay, great. Anshu, back to you. So.
Just also staying on the topic of debates, we were talking in class about how like politics has turned into a spectacle, and during debates that the candidates kind of like attack each other instead of answering the issues. So how do you think that affects voters, especially like new voters? And yeah.
That's another good question because I think voters are probably turned off by that, but that's not going to stop these candidates from doing that. They're trying to score points and they're trying to demolish their rivals. Let's take the primary debate between, it was among all of the Democratic presidential candidates, but it was Kamala Harris, you know, lashing into Joe Biden about forced busing. Remember that back in maybe
one of the first debates, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And she was, you know, a lot of people just didn't like her because of that. They thought that she was just, that it was a staged performance, which it was, and that she was ready with it and ready to dramatically portray herself as that little girl was me on the bus. But boy, it worked too. It got a lot of attention, and it showed how good she is in this prosecutorial style that she has shown not only throughout her career as a district attorney and attorney general, but even on the Senate Judiciary Committee with Brett Kavanaugh, where she prosecuted his case, so to speak. And so I think I think when it came time to select a vice presidential running mate, who traditionally is the attack dog in the campaign, that Biden appreciated even what had happened to him. So to answer your question, voters may be turned off by it, and Kamala Harris was widely criticized, but you know what? She's on the ticket, and she is positioning herself to be an important part of this administration. And so we might not like it, but it's going to be part of it. And maybe it serves a good purpose, the attack stuff.
Yeah, I'll just add, people I know who are political consultants tell me that for the undecided voter, the thing that moves them one way or the other are unfortunately those negative ads or negative
Oh,
attacks.
sure. Oh, sure. Negative ads work. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, Wesley, back to you.
Okay, so moving away from debates a little bit, if you ran into the candidates, right, like on the street, just, you know, bump into them, like what is one question like you would ask them about anything, anything at all?
I would say, what does your candidacy mean to a town like Buffalo? A Rust Belt city. It's lost half its population over the last 60 years. A city that is rebounding, but is not among the most prosperous of cities. What would you do? What is your candidacy going to mean for a place like Buffalo? Now, I could ask all kinds of things about. All right, what's your feelings about our relationship with China or something like that? You know? Who the hell cares in Buffalo? You know, I want to bring this home to our readers, and I want to be able to see if they can identify with our readers. And sometimes during a debate, I keep a question in my back pocket that I often ask is, what's your big idea? What's your project? What's the main thing you'd like to tackle? What is some big vision that you have as governor of New York that would make a difference in people's lives? Sometimes I like to ask that question too. And sometimes, you know, in a debate or something, you're not going to hear those things. But if I had that opportunity, I might do something like that. Yeah, I might be real wrong, but that's what I do. Maybe I'd have the boss bite my head off for not asking the China question. I don't know.
So, and then just further that, so do you think debates are really, because I've watched like a few, but not a lot, not for a lot of time, just kind of cued in for a minute, but I've noticed that they may not always be like about finding information and more just about criticizing and like attacking.
Yeah.
So do you think that's going to continue? It seems like.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. By the way, yeah, it's going to be part of it. It's going to be part of it. Yeah.
Do you think that's right?
Yeah. Why not? You know, look, this ain't beanbag, you know, as Judge Thomas P. McMahon used to say about Erie County Democratic politics. It ain't beanbag. And so we may not like it, but it's part of it.
Yeah. That was a great question, Wesley, and good answer on the spot, Bob. Maybe you should be on the other side of the table on debates.
I had a struggle over that one, as you could see.
Yeah, that was. Let me go back to Andrew. Let me just, you know, how are you fixed for time today?
I am good. I have to be on a newsroom meeting at 10:30.
Okay. I mean, I don't think we'll go that long. And I know Ann's class ends.
My next thing.
Yeah. We don't have an end time for my students. Ann's class, I believe, ends at 9:45. So
okay.
If you see them walking out of the room, there's nothing that you said or anything.
That's something I said.
Yeah.
Bye, guys.
Okay, Andrew, your turn again.
Well, I just wanted to go off Wesley's question. How would you want the candidates to answer the question you asked?
The question that I just posed, you mean?
Yeah. Like, what would you expect them to say?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I guess that's why I would ask the question, because I don't know what they would say. But I know that my story for tomorrow morning would be, did they answer the question? You know what I mean? Did they propose anything that is going to be relevant in your life, reader of the Buffalo News? Did they offer me anything about tax increases or tax cuts that's going to affect your life? Is there going to be some kind of a job program in the middle of pandemic that is going to put the 11% of Erie County's workers who are unemployed right now? Is there something that's going to help them? Is there something that's going to be available in unemployment insurance for them? Is there something that is going to pinpoint various industries here in Western New York? Is there something that they've got in mind about the automotive industry? I don't know. But a good candidate coming into Buffalo, New York would be able to answer those questions, I think, and anticipate that question, and have something that is Buffalo-centric, upstate New York-centric, in an area where the economy still lags behind much of the other rest of the country.
Yeah, I think as Bob said, candidates have staffs, and the good staffs are going to brief them wherever they go. They're going to have notes. They're going to know maybe who to, give a shout out to during their speech, what the big issues are, and things like that. And back to the way that Bob answered Wesley's question, I think it tells you a lot about what journalists do, and that's to get information that's important to your reader. And you reminded me way back when Jesse Jackson was running for president. He came to the New Jersey State House, and pretty much they gave him an office where he could do some work, and every State House reporter had a chance to ask him one question. You go in, and same thing. I could have asked him anything about the national campaign, but I asked him about an environmental issue in the area I was covering, which he wasn't familiar with, but he talked in general terms about what he wanted to do with the EPA. So I got a story that was important to our readers, and that's kind of what we all do as journalists. And everybody can get the big, the general story, but when you can ask specifically, how is this important to the people who read my newspaper or go to my website, that's what people are going to look for.
Yeah.
I think we're back to you, Wesley.
All right, so just kind of switching it over back to like journalism and reporting. We talked about anonymous sources last week in class, and we read some articles about the public not trusting when an article comes out and they quote anonymous sources. I was wondering, like, how you, as a reporter, how important are anonymous sources to you when you write?
I don't have a problem with using anonymous sources as long as I pass a few tests. First of all, my editors are going to ask me who these anonymous sources are. I'll tell them. I'll only tell them. And I have to pass some tests with me, too. I have to ask, does this person have an axe to grind? Is this person going to benefit somehow by making this charge? I have to weigh that before I am able to go down that path. An example happened to me the other day. A government official passed on some dirt about another government official. This government official was not an elected official, but passed on about an elected official. And they want me to do their dirty work for them and dig into this. I said, why don't you just say it? Big shot, and that usually shuts them up. But back to your question, I do it. I have to pass some very rigorous tests. I did a story maybe a year ago about someone who I've been writing about for 30 years. His name is Steve Pigeon. He's the former Erie County Democratic chairman who was very close to Governor Cuomo and who was ultimately indicted by state and federal grand juries on a number of election law violations, as well as bribery charges, bribing the judge, and some other things. It was the culmination of many years of things that I had done about the way that he was skirting the law, or also that I had written about even two successive district attorneys who looked the other way because this guy was so powerful that they would not bring election law violation charges against him. And that was a huge story that, still reverberates to this day. But I had a story that Dan Herbeck, my friend and colleague and fellow Bonnie alum, we did together, in which we said that Pigeon was cooperating with the Justice Department and the FBI as part of a plea agreement in which he pled guilty to reduce charges in federal court. I had to work a long time, and so did Dan, to be able to get 3 sources that said that this was happening, and they were good sources. So we did it, and we got it, and we were right, and nobody challenged us.
Okay, great. I'm gonna I had an email exchange with Andrew, and I said if there's a lull in the conversation, ask Bob about when Donald Trump called his house, and so I see and students are
Yep. Bye, everybody.
heading out. So I was hoping they could hear too, so any of them want to listen to it. But I've heard it, and I'm sorry to make you tell the story again, but it's a great story, and you're a great storyteller. So
well, it was the Republican primary in April of 2016, and I'd been down in New York for several times and several days covering things down there because New York in the Republican primary was important. And I think that when Trump won New York, he won the Republican nomination. But so I'd been down there, and I kept calling his people, and I kept saying, "Gee, I'm right down the street from Trump Tower. Anytime that I can get him, even for 20 minutes, please." And so they said, I don't know. We'll get back to you. So I'm there on a Friday afternoon, and finally I know it's not going to happen. And I had to get back to Buffalo quickly, so I hopped on a plane and came back. And I'm driving home, and my cell phone rings, and my wife, Ann, who's another Bonaventure grad, says, "You better go back to the newsroom." And I said, "Why?" "Because someone wants to talk to you." And I said, "Who?" "Donald Trump." I said, "What do you mean? He just called here." She says, "Oh, my God." So I find out that he calls the house looking for me, and he says, "Is Robert McCarthy there?" And says, "No, may I ask who's calling?" And he says, "Donald Trump." And my wife just goes, "Well, hello," which has become a famous thing around here. "Well, hello." And he says to her something like, "Well, I've been trying to get a hold of him, and he must be a very important person. I can't get a hold of him." And my wife says, "Well, I guess he's not important enough to be home in time for dinner, is he?" And so these guys start bonding. So I finally go back to the newsroom and call him because I want to be set up with my stuff and my tape recorder and everything. And I go back to the newsroom, and I get him on the phone. He was in Hartford at a rally, and he says, "Wow, well, before we get going, you got the nicest wife in the world." And, "Oh, yeah, I do. "Well, how old is she?" "No," he says, "Do you have any kids?" And I said, "Yeah, Dan, he's 28. 28? Well, she sounds 25. Now I'm getting worried. But he was very nice to her and very nice to me. And I also flew on his plane with him one time on his own plane. His 737 Trump plane makes Air Force One look like a crop duster, believe me. And that's when he was thinking about running for governor in 2014. I got a lot of stories from that too. But he was very nice. He really was.
yeah, sometimes there's a political scientist, Kathleen Hall Jameson. I read a lot of her work.
Sure.
She talks about the difference between an upstage and a downstage personality for politicians, which with social media sometimes you don't have that difference, but certainly people have the image they get from watching them on TV, reading stories, and then when you sit down with them in an informal situation,
Sure.
You realize they're a lot like everyone else.
Right. I mean, take the tapes that Bob Woodward has for his book Rage.
Yeah.
I mean, they sound like they're very intimate and honest to goodness conversations.
Right.
That was part of Trump's effort here. He was trying to make a friend out of Bob Woodward and trying to get a positive book out of him. But you could see that's that's the way that that was. And it wasn't him railing from a podium about enemies of the people, you know, or fake news.
Yeah, I did notice that too, that, it seemed like a regular conversation. Okay. Andrew, I'm sorry I stole your question there, but my timing was off. I thought I could get Bob tell the story before Ann's class headed out, but you can see it's now. Ann's probably still there, but
It takes me a long time to tell a story.
that's okay. So why don't we do one more question from each student, and we'll let you get back to work. Okay. Andrew.
Yeah, so my last question was also about reporting, and in class we were talking about like the 5 filters that media goes through. So I was wondering, like, as a reporter, which one you're most affected by, and has that changed over like the course of your career?
The filters that I go through, Anshu, is that what you're
Yeah,
asking?
Yeah.
I have a feeling you don't know what they are.
Yeah, remind me what they are.
Well, it's a whole lecture. So,
Yeah.
but it's something I read actually when I was getting my doctorate, and it's a theory that before news reaches the public, it goes through a number of filters. I mean, basically that it's affected by the drive for profit, the business side of the industry, by the need to get advertisers. Like sometimes certain types of stories might be written more so to appeal to a demographic that's going to buy ads. Something else called the symbiotic relationship between the press and sources, which is kind of like when you're at the State House and it's easy for the governor to reach reporters because they're all there, and easier for reporters to get sources. That's a kind of a nutshell of the media theory.
Yeah.
But, I mean, why don't you just
Gotcha.
talk? I mean, I was going to ask, and maybe, I mean, you can talk about any of them, but really the effect of the business side of the industry on the journalism side.
I don't think there's a problem there, because my main criterion, I think the one that I ask myself, is this a good story? You know, is this going to be something that people are going to read and learn something? If it's a good story, it'll be on the front page. And if somebody is in Wegmans and they see it on the front page, they might pick up the paper, and that's good for the paper. If they see it online, they're going to click on that story, and that helps our advertising department say, look how many thousands of clicks this story got, and we got this day. So I think for the most part, those two things work together. There are times when they're going to conflict. You know, I'm not going to tell you that I haven't written stories that might offend advertisers, and there was concern about it. But I don't think we've ever held a story because of it. You know, there might be concern about it, but nobody has ever done that. Or I've had stories that in the old days might have been buried in the paper that shouldn't have been, because they were going to offend somebody powerful when other people were running the paper at the time. But I think that the vast majority of times that is the main filter, Anshu. That's the one question that you have to ask yourself. Is this a good story? Is this going to be something that people are going to read? And have I written it in a way in the lead sentence that's going to make them read the next graph? And have I written that graph in a way that might introduce a quote that's going to make them read the 4th, 5th, and 6th graphs of the story? That's the ultimate test to me. And so it's a matter of doing good reporting, that you've come up with a good story, and it's a matter of writing it well, so that is going to make people read it.
Did that answer your question, Anshu? Because I had to give Bob a crash course in the. I'll send you my video lecture on the 5 filters sometime.
Yeah,
but,
I like it. I like it. Yeah.
It's actually one of those things that, as a reporter, then working in government, when I went back to school, I got a chance to actually look at some of these theories and how things work. And, I was sitting there in a classroom and said, wow, this makes sense. It actually happened.
That's why I like talking to you guys.
Yeah.
First of all, to Rich as an academic, and secondly, to you folks as students, because it brings me back to basic things sometimes. And it brings me back to things that I learned at St. Bonaventure and that I have learned throughout my career about how to do this and do it correctly. And that's why I value these sessions as much as you guys do.
Well, that's nice. I mean, yeah, there's conversations on all levels, or I think
Sure.
as a society, we don't do enough of it these days.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Wesley, you get the last student question, but I'm gonna, do the final question and wrap up. But go ahead.
Sounds good. I get it. So the reason I want to become a teacher is because of my teacher in 11th grade high school, and he said that if he's going to vote for someone as a president, it's because that they've proved to him that they're the best of the best, not the best of the worst, right? And the debates are really a time when you can prove that. And you mentioned a little bit ago, how their demeanor is. Are they going to act presidential? So in your experience, like since you've been 18, old enough to vote, how have presidents been acting the part?
How presidents have been.
Have they been acting the part? Have they been president?
Has
there been a lull in that in history?
Well, I mean, I think that's one of the things that is going to be a huge issue in this election is whether Trump has proved himself worthy of the office. Has he been presidential? We all know that he hasn't been in a lot of ways, okay? That's going to be, I think there's going to be a Biden effort to say, we're not going to have controversy every night as a result of something that I have said. By the same token, Donald Trump didn't get there by, going around with his nose in the air, acting like he was George Washington. Mm-hmm. He said, I'm going to DC to shake things up, to drain the swamp, to kick some butt, basically. And I think that's the fundamental question here. Do we want to continue with that? And there's other fundamental questions, no question. But that's going to be one of them. And it's going to be how this is going to be conducted. And so to answer your question, I think that Donald Trump certainly has changed the way the presidency is conducted, the way it's viewed, and that will be a fundamental question that will be addressed in this election. Yep.
Okay, great. Well, I really appreciate this. And like I said, I just wanted to wrap up. But I wanted to mention to you, I'm sure one of your colleagues mentioned to you a few weeks ago, Governor Cuomo mentioned you on his press call and said you were responsible
I got 47 emails the next morning. That was the day he was at Roswell. I heard from kids I went to grammar school with, and
he said couldn't figure out why Western New York the rates were so bad. He said it may have originated in the Buffalo News newsroom and probably with Bob. But then he had.
Oh, he did say that. He did say that. Yeah.
Actually, I have it. I'll send you.
I didn't hear that. I thought you were talking about when he was at Roswell.
No, I'll send you the clip. It's kind of fun, and because
okay, I didn't
sort of things that Ann and I do on Sunday mornings. The governor's doing a press conference, and because he sometimes says stuff for us, but he said that at the end, and then he had it right away. Just kidding. So he didn't want to be. But let me speaking of the governor, I just wanted to get your thoughts on the split between New York City metropolitan area and the rest of the state. There's always been, a feeling that, I know up here people seem to be resentful of what happens downstate, maybe vice versa, but I've seen it get worse during the pandemic. And, some of it is Facebook comments, which are probably not a good place to judge things by, but I just get the sense that, every time something gets posted, or even you see signs in bars, anti-Cuomo things. Do you think it's gotten worse?
Yeah, I do.
And why? Yeah.
Part of it is the total Democratic takeover of state government in Albany. When the Republican Senate got defeated, in 2016, I guess it was, or 2018, I can't remember. But anyway, now you're talking about Democrats having all of the executive positions of governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, and controller, and controlling both houses of the legislature. And that means total domination by New York City. It used to be that the Republican Senate, composed mostly of metropolitan suburbs and upstate, was kind of a check on the Democrats in the assembly and in the governor's office. That has now changed so that we are seeing total domination of state government by New York City, and it's just going to become more entrenched, because the way that the way that the Democrats will reapportion the legislative districts beginning next year will basically put the New York Republican Party out of existence. Here and there, they'll be able to pop up with some victories, but they will never, ever, in our lifetimes, that I think, be a part of governing New York State, or at least will be a huge challenge. So I think that has something to do with it. And I brought this up to the governor one day. He comes in regularly when we're in regular business and sits down with our editorial board. And we had a story about where the vote came from, and we had a map. And so we had this very dark blue cluster in New York City. And then there was a huge swath of red throughout upstate New York, with dots of blue in the big cities along the thruway. And we asked them about this, and we said, what do you think? What do you think about governing a state that's two states? You know, there's a red state, there's a red New York and a blue New York, and it's not just people's opinions, but it's geographically centered. And he just basically shrugged his shoulders and said, that's the way it is. He didn't want to go down that road. But when you look at that map and you saw the huge red upstate, little blue down here in the southeastern corner, well, that little blue in that southeastern corner is, 12 million people in the area, in the metropolitan area. And they call the shots. And that's all there is to it, And New York City is reliably Democrat. It will continue to be, and that's because of the nature of what New York City is, constantly reinventing itself, and reinventing itself right now with influx of immigrants from all over the world who come there and tend to join up with the Democratic Party. So it used to be that, a Rudy Giuliani or somebody could be mayor, and that's maybe still possible. A Republican like Rudy or John Lindsay. But I don't see a Republican governor in New York State for a long time.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the background a lot better. I can give you New Jersey background, but sure. You understand the split of the legislature.
A lot of it is the same, Rich. A lot of it's the same, I think.
Yeah, I can see how that falls into things. Yeah. So anyway, it's been great talking with you. Hopefully, I often see Bob and Dan Herbecker, where you alluded to, down at Bonaventure basketball games. So hopefully that will be possible this year.
Hope so.
Okay. Anna's in the classroom. I see her watching a screen. So hey, she's waving goodbye.
Hey, pal.
Okay. Andrew and Wesley, thanks. You guys asked great questions. We'll be following it up with something on Moodle the way we did with the last discussion.
Good. And Chu, you're a freshman. Don't worry. This too shall pass. It will be different someday, right? Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, okay. Guys. Well, thanks.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Enjoy the rest of the day, everybody.
I will.
Yes.
I enjoyed it a lot.
Thank you.
All the best, everyone.
Bye.
Go back.